We have another edition of our New Voices series, all for folks left and right under the age of 30. And today's guest is Carlos Gamez. He is from the state of Florida. He's running for the statehouse. He briefly ran for office before, but he is literally fresh out of college and jumping into the political arena. So, Carlos, welcome. Nice to talk with you.
Nice to meet you, Chuck. Thank you for having me.
Well, let me start with what motivated you. You're in now. You have decided to jump into the political world now. And I'll look, when I was 18, I really thought about it. I remember somebody won as an 18-year-old in my county down in back then it was just Dade County, now known as Miami-Dade. And I thought, hey, I could do that. And I didn't have the guts. So I admire this. You had the guts to do this because everybody's telling you, I'm sure, oh, you're too young. You need to live life before you can represent people. But you're not taking that advice. You've had the guts to do this. So number one, I admire that. But what's your motivation?
My motivation, honestly, is just to get change done. Florida has really been, for the past 30 years or so, under Republican control. And there's been issues, right? And so sort of thinking about the issue of affordability, the issue of allowing people to actually live the fullest extent of their lives, right? Republicans typically tout economic independence, but rarely often do policies actually allow for that to happen. On top of being a member of the disability community and being a wheelchair user, that has also impacted me as well.
Well, let's talk about that. I feel like your politics, the best politicians are those that come from a lived experience. You know, it's not learning from other people, it's your own lived experience. You've talked about you're navigating life in a wheelchair. What are some policies that make it harder for you to get that economic freedom you're looking for?
Some policies that easily make it harder are saying, on one hand, Medicaid is meant to provide health services, but then when it comes to getting a job, you can only get up to a certain limit. And because the economy has changed so drastically, that limit is very hard to do on a full-time basis, right? So, for example, for Florida, in receiving SSI, which requires literally being in poverty to get the services you need, one can only make up to $42,000.
Yeah, if you make a little bit more, then you don't get the coverage that would pay for the services you need. It really is. You want to work and you're incentivized not to.
Yep. On top of like all the Medicaid work requirements, right, and all that discussion, there was no true discussion of what it means to have a permanent disability, be on Medicaid, and be literally stuck there because you move 1 foot ahead and they want to take you 10 steps back.
What do you hope to do? Some of this is federal and some of this is state. Obviously, the federal government funds Medicaid, but it is the state that essentially executes the program. And I think that's where people get confused about Medicaid, right? Is it a federal program, a state program? The answer is yes, it's both.
Both.
So if you're elected to the state house, and we can talk about the crazy gerrymanderings that take place, and that's a whole nother discussion, but I maybe we'll have time to get into that. What do you hope to do? What is it that you think, what changed? Your presence would be a change, but what else? What's the legislation you want to get done?
The primary legislation that I think would be beneficial would be to literally double the iBudget waiver program, which is a Medicaid waiver program that allows you to not be shackled by so many rules, correct? So there's been a waiting list that's been the focus of disability rights advocates, and there's been some good efforts, honestly, by Republicans in trying to make it more transparent how many people are on the waiting list, etc. But with almost $5 billion in reserves, not that much has gone to the disability community. So that would be my primary focus.
Yeah. When you've been talking with voters, what are they bringing up to you? I can anticipate two issues. in addition to what you're talking about. One I would assume would be insurance,
Yeah.
and the other being education, because when it comes to state politics, I feel like that's where people know that the most impact comes from. What are the challenges you're hearing about in those two issues?
Yeah, I think with education, the issue is sort of, we talk about changes in the labor market, changes that higher education, even the state university system is going through, is, we hear this idea that's typically discussed by Republicans, the idea of meritocracy, right? And look, I have an issue when I see a younger sibling get A's and B's on the report card, but it's so drastically different in the other direction on the test, right? That clearly has to be addressed. But I think the question regards to education is, can I have a fair shot for my child to succeed? Right?
Mhm.
There's this talk about charter schools, and if you really want to talk about a two-tiered system, it's the education system we have right now in Florida. Because similar to a little league, teams playing against each other,
Mm-hmm.
right now charter schools are playing by a completely different set of rules, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have different structures they can go through, different programs that public schools are not allowed. Charter schools are not bad in and of itself. It just depends on what guardrails do we put so public schools can be on equal footing.
You navigate life in a wheelchair. There's a lot of charter schools that will simply refuse somebody in a wheelchair because they'll say, we don't have the capacity.
Hmm.
A public school can't. They can't do that, and
Correct.
frankly, we don't want them to do that. But I'm not sure it's a good thing that a charter school can do that.
Correct. I think that's something that has to be thought through the legal process. I think that a lot of recent federal cases discussing the use of federal dollars for private schools
Mm-hmm.
may have opened the avenue for greater accountability. But I definitely do think that accountability should be had of charter schools,
Mm-hmm.
especially if they're receiving, I'm going to call it quasi-public funds through here in Florida, we have Step Up for students, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But they should definitely be held accountable, and all individual with disabilities should have the option to choose, but unfortunately they don't.
If the talk to me about the other issues that you're hearing from people as you talk with them about your candidacy.
Yeah, one thing I'm really hearing from people, it just the problem with the current administration here in Florida and the Florida legislature really being enraptured by federal politics, right? And
Mm-hmm.
not really focus on the ground is like home insurance. I know that recently there's this talk about a federal bill, at least from the Florida rep, sorry, federal representative Byron Donalds
Mm-hmm.
about flood insurance. But
Mm-hmm.
that's such a tiny piece of the problem
Mm-hmm.
in which home insurance companies can choose to do whatever. And this is sort of personal to me because I remember my parents had to go through changing home insurance companies so many times, all because they're like, oh, we found that there was a sinkhole from a sinkhole claim or something like that from 20 years ago.
Right.
Well, why didn't you tell me that last year? Like, where's the logic in that, right?
Yeah.
And so just not having basic protections that can allow consumers to shop in the so-called free market.
There's a reason results matter more than promises. Just like there's a reason Morgan & Morgan has become America's largest injury law firm. For the last 35 years, they've recovered $25 billion for more than 500,000 clients. It includes cases where insurance companies offered next to nothing, short of shortchanging, seeing if they could get away with it. And Morgan & Morgan fought back, and they won millions. In Pennsylvania, one client was awarded $26 million. It was a staggering 40 times the amount that the insurance company originally offered. That offer, $650,000, whatever it took to sort of get away without paying. So with more than 1,000 lawyers across the country, Morgan & Morgan knows how to deliver for everyday people. So if you're injured, you're looking for a lawyer, check out forthepeople.com/Toddcast or dial pound law, pound 529 on your cell phone. And remember, all law firms are not the same. So give Morgan & Morgan a look. Their fee is free unless they win.
You know, it's funny you bring up the sinkhole issue, which people don't quite, if you're not from Florida and not specifically from Central Florida, you think, what the heck are you guys talking about? But this is a recurring issue, always primarily in Central Florida. And I guess the question is, where does fault lie? You know, how much of this is on county governments giving out, allowing for development in riskier areas? Like who, you know, that's what the insurance companies will argue that. The homeowners like, hey, why did they build homes in a place that was uninsurable? Who should be held accountable in all of this?
I think similar to, you know, the concept of federalism, there's a lot of anding in policy solutions, right? I think both at the state level, there should be a greater focus on having home insurance companies meet certain criteria. As right now, I believe it's the state-owned home insurance company Citizens that is really underwater in the amount of people trying to get in there, but really being unable to provide insurance that's capable of bringing it all together. So I think also at the county level, there has to be some differences in zoning requirements, which can be provided by state guidance as well.
As well as builders having to build a certain. Well, I'll give you an example of something, and I'm curious where your head is on this. So I had Rick Scott right after one of the hurricanes came through Southwest Florida. And Rick Scott, this is back in my old Meet the Press days. And I remember we were talking about whether or not manufactured housing should be banned in the state of Florida. And you had two different counties right next to each other. Collier County, home of Naples, does not allow that material to be used to build homes. And guess how little actual home destruction they had? Charlotte County had a building boom and had manufacturing. Now it's more affordable housing. So here we are, affordable housing, more dangerous, harder to insure, versus a wealthier county that could de-risk, but the housing's not affordable. You see where I'm going here. This seems to be the challenge. You know, this is why this insurance issue is so layered in Florida. We got a housing crisis, affordability crisis, an insurance crisis, and they sometimes work against each other. So let's start with manufactured housing. Should it be legal in the state of Florida?
I think that manufacturing housing, honestly, I'm quite torn based on what you just said. And I'm going to be honest here in saying I don't know much about it. So I'm always willing to learn more. But I think
as I was trying to describe it, in case listeners or viewers are wondering, if you've ever been on the interstate and you've been behind a tractor trailer with a big old house on the back of it, this is essentially, you know, this is manufactured housing. Anyway, go ahead.
Got it. In terms of that, I would say that manufactured housing should be allowed, but as long as it's compliant with certain factors outlined county by county, right? What you have as a risk in Polk County might not be in Miami-Dade or the Leon County, etc.
Right.
So I think it should vary and not be at the state
level. Do you mind sharing your story? I mean, you've in you know how you've navigated. You've had to navigate life differently than a lot of people watching or listening right now. Do you mind sharing your story with us?
Yes. So I was born to my parents who were immigrants coming to this country who came in hope of that shining city as described typically by President Ronald Reagan. And so born premature, went to the NICU for about 3 months. And so in traversing this of being a wheelchair user, I think that it's been interesting, especially in traversing the K through 12 educational system. When I originally came through, I was in what was then, I'm not sure if it's still now, the vernacular, called ESA classrooms, right? Classrooms designated specifically for students with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I progressed, went on to regular, or to be mainstreamed into the regular classroom, and went on to luckily advanced
Mm-hmm.
classrooms. And so I think that my experience as a person with disability had allowed me to be more malleable. Like, as in, I don't have necessarily a fit certain ideas and stick with them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm able to adapt, right? Because that's what I've basically been doing my whole
Your whole life, you've had to adapt to a world built for other people.
yeah.
Right.
And so I think that, I'm a curious mind. I love reading the news, learning about
Mhm.
government, how government works, how government can be made better. Um, but I think a lot of what I've done, like at least on the personal level, is really trying to overcome mental barriers rather than
Mhm.
physical ones. And I think, to connect it back to politics, we have the ADA that was passed um 35 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. But policy really hasn't moved beyond that, right? Because there's so much about people with disabilities that goes beyond ramps and access. What about like community integration? And just thinking about disastrous cuts that, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services want to do that affect people like us,
Mhm.
moving out expertise. I always argue the efficiency to what end, right? You want the government to be efficient, but efficient to what end? And so that's
Mhm.
sort of how I've made it through life.
It's interesting when you're talking about navigating K through 12. And this is something that I don't think people fully realize. While education is quote unquote locally funded, the early classrooms you were involved with, that was funded by the federal government and the Department of Education.
Correct.
Yeah. Were you in Polk County this whole time, by the way?
Yes.
Yeah,
Since I,
Polk, which is
since I
just
came
south
to Florida at the age of 2.
at the age of 2. In Lakeland, and just to give people a barrier, so how would you say what you're about 30 minutes from Disney World? Is that
Yes, 45 minutes roughly,
yeah,
depending on traffic.
to the south, right? Well, it's Central Florida. There's always
Yeah.
traffic. um, what give some advice to parents with a child in one of these younger programs where because I could tell you I've had some parents who've had experience where their kid is where you're in a classroom and you're all put into the same classroom, but you all have different issues and different needs. And it actually can be, and I think this movement to integrate has been more widely accepted. But share your experiences and give some advice to parents and to folks who may be interested in the experience you had.
Yeah, I would say to parents and just people in general, sometimes just try to just be there and listen. Like sometimes we have, like I said, our needs as people with disabilities are multifaceted. They're not all structural, really trying to be further emotionally creating not necessarily safe spaces,
Mhm.
but spaces that allow for us to grow. Just thinking back to my childhood, and this just maybe me personally.
Mhm.
My parents were always on the side of caution, right? Avoiding all risk, as much risk as possible. Having a child with a disability, having a person in your family is one you care for, you watch over, etc.
Mhm.
But allow for gradual risk taking, as I think that for me,
So give me an
growing
example
up.
of a risk you wanted to take and your mom and dad were like, no, no, Carlos.
So an example is, well, just recently was sort of me deciding whether or not to go to FFU or UF to
Mhm.
continue my studies, and so it was sort of that breaking free of being independent, but
Mhm.
at the same time worrying if A, B, C, or D might happen,
Mhm.
and so just trying to assuage those worries. But yeah.
Well, you brought it up. What do you're quite well educated as it is. You have a master's from in what is it?
American.
From American in education policy.
Mhm.
What would you go to Florida State to study? What's the next thing that you want to continue doing?
Funny enough, I'd actually want to investigate dual enrollment programs.
Hmm.
Because I think it's an interesting gateway in showing, I guess, shifting how students go through the process of transitioning from high school to college, especially noting that even though there's the same requirement for high school teachers to only have master's degree,
Hmm.
I would argue the question of is that enough
Hmm.
to have a student that goes through dual enrollment be successful in college as compared to going to a community college, right? Where you have
Hmm.
a different culture, different environment, and sort of just investigating that.
Hmm. You have navigated this your life in an era of fast moving technological advances, in some cases that have probably really helped you um, overcome some obstacles that maybe if you'd been born 10 years earlier, you never would have been able to overcome. What what is what are some examples of some things that have where technological change gives you some hope on overcoming some new obstacles?
You know, I'm that type of person that think that, technology, motorized equipment that I use, such as the power wheelchair,
Hmm.
and other aspects has helped. But beyond this frontier, I think I'm not sure exactly. As to other technology. Again, each person with a disability is different,
Hmm.
but at least just from my perspective, I'm just wondering how the future may look like, right? For people like me, people with various disabilities, whether it be mobility or otherwise. But I think especially having the ability to use motorized equipment,
Hmm.
motorized vehicles has been especially beneficial.
Hmm.
Like, for example, using a ramp to get on the car, right? In case my parents needs to take me somewhere and being able to go out, as
Right.
compared to probably in the past requiring to wait for a bus or and even medical transportation
Right.
today. But just knowing that like we're continues to grow. But I'm somewhat muddy. I know there've been advancements in AI, etc.
Hmm.
But I don't see a purposeful use of technological advancement for people like me, at least now.
Would you like to see more focus on that?
Yes, I think, again, at various levels, federal, state levels,
Hmm.
there should be a focus on this. I mean, we literally represent 15% of the electorate,
Hmm.
and there's dissatisfaction right now with both parties. So the parties step up, who knows? They win the next election.
Do you feel like, I mean, you said something there that I think I just want to make sure I didn't mishear you. It sounds like you're worried that in the future, not only are we not that, look, I was there when the ADA passed in 91, and the transformation in a decade on access was enormous.
Mhm.
Okay. In the public space, right? Whether it's football games, concerts, all sorts of the public venues, like you really took a while to, took a few lawsuits, to make sure people understood this was the
Right.
law, but you got there. It sounds like you're worried though that there's going to be, not only is there not a movement to create more accessibility for someone that's like yourself, but that if anything, we're taking a step back. Is that your concern?
Not necessarily a step back, but stagnation in the ideals. In my opinion, the ADA opened up one lane of access,
Hmm.
but there are so many other different lanes that haven't been touched yet.
Give me an example. I mean, do you feel like
And
employment? Do you feel like you have equal access to employment?
equal access to employment, as a matter of no, I would say no on that case, going back to the point of Medicaid, in which if I garner
Right.
employment, I lose the essentials I need to
Yeah.
live. We talk about independence, economic freedom, ideals that conservatives hold, along with Democrats holding equity, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just that with such a combination of ideals, you
Mhm.
think they focus on what the frontier is for the disability rights movement,
Mhm.
but there isn't much to focus on it.
No, you're right on that. So let's talk about the role of government, because this is ultimately, where should government have a light touch and where should it have a heavy touch?
In terms of disability, right?
Yes, starting with that.
I think there should be a heavier touch on removing policies that shackle people with disabilities to not have economic freedom.
Right. And this
Right?
Medicaid, you've outlined this Medicaid trap
It's just
extraordinarily well. It's a
I
trap.
mean, imagine
Yeah.
a person with a disability today that relies on Medicaid deciding whether or not to go to college or whether or not to get a job. Imagine how agonizing that choice must be.
The
Be like,
incentive is not there, is it? It's only if you
It's not.
want to, boredom, right?
Mhm.
Your intellectual
Right.
boredom, but you're actually incentivized not to.
hmm What happened to the dreamers and doers? Unfortunately, we're not allowed to.
Mhm.
And then I think with other areas of government, I sort of go back to this, funny enough, this idea by Ezra Klein,
Mm.
this idea of good regulation, but not over-regulating, right?
Mm.
So what are points where I would say they should be a harder touch on pain points of the American people?
Mhm.
Like if you were to survey the American people today, affordability, housing, etc., those should be hard focus points. But
Yep.
potentially softer touches can be more policies on the periphery, but that also impact
Mhm.
as it's all of almost like a spider web
Mhm.
of different aspects that intermingle.
Let's close with this. You're a Democrat. Why are you a Democrat?
I'm a Democrat because I believe in that everyone should have a fair shot. Sort of, I guess, even though I'm Gen Z, going back to the ideals of Clinton Gore, right?
Mm.
If you work hard, you play by the rules, you have a fair shot to succeed.
Mm-hmm. That's a familiar line. I mean, that was the 96 reelect over and over again. And then Barack Obama adopted it with the Osawatomie speech back in Kansas. Sounds like you're a big reader. You've got what biographies or memoirs have shaped your thinking about government the most?
I think the biographies and memoir that shaped my thinking about government the most, funny enough, was this past, I guess, Christmas time, somewhere around that time, I actually read the biographies of Anthony Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Good
So
for you,
sort of,
back to back.
it was nice. It was a nice read.
They're close. They were close friends, and they both probably
Mhm.
mentioned it a lot, if I remember, in their books.
Correct. And I think, getting back to that human to human connection, rather difficult in this era of polarization. But I think it's possible if we get back to recognizing that we're all Americans first.
When you think about the Republican side of the aisle, who's your favorite Republican these days?
Oh, that's an interesting question. You mean statewide or just anywhere?
Somebody that you think, hey, he makes me think differently. He makes me, or she makes me think, oh, I'm going to give them an extra listen. They're thoughtful.
Rand Paul.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, he's not a stereotype.
Mm-mm. He lays out thorough intellectual debates that I honestly prefer. I prefer to have an honest and an intellectual debate than to shout on the other side, at the other side.
Well, in some ways, it reinforces the fact that you consume the memoirs of Scalia and Ginsburg, ideologically very far away from each other.
Yes, indeed.
Well, how's the campaign going? You feel pretty good? When's the
I feel
primaries?
good.
Next August, right?
Yes, I believe so. That's for the primary.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that, my moderate tendencies doesn't lead to,
Do you have a primary challenger or you don't know yet?
I don't know yet. So far, none,
Mm-hmm.
but who knows what happens. If anything, um, we talk about winning, right?
Mm-hmm.
But looking at small wins, what I really hope to do with this candidacy is to bring about the plight of people with disabilities to
Yeah.
the round table, as well as focusing on issues that I think are not discussed in a, not to say nonpartisan, but like out
Right.
of the muck of politics, and just hit the ground run to work.
Well, I'll tell you, I think you will be making a very compelling case on the Medicaid work requirements and what that does, the cap, all of that stuff. You're a real world example. You want to be a bigger contributor to society, and they won't let you.
Yep. But we do
Anyway,
it
it's a powerful
one
argument,
step at a
Carlos.
time.
Yeah. It was great to get to know you.
Thank you, Chuck.
Good luck. Be safe on the trail and keep
Will
talking
do.
to people. All right.
Good luck to you, Gaines.
Yeah. Thanks. Good luck to your Bulls. They're not bad. It's going to be scary.
bad.
By the time this airs, they'll have already played. So
Yeah.
we'll see if I'm not counting my chickens.
Yeah.
Thank you, Carlos.
Bye.